Welcome back to Lenz's Doctor Who Review, episode number 42. This one discussing, now, there's some interesting fun facts this one. Number one, there are two particular alien type characters who make their last appearance in Classic Who before they pop up again for New Who. I'll get to who they are. And it is also, for me, the second to last story to discuss for John Pertwee's final season as the Doctor. And it is also the second to last one discussed for season 11. We have The Monster of Peladon, the sequel to The Curse of Peladon. Now, this comes just after another particular story, which is basically Death to Daleks. Yes, believe it or not, this was the very next story, which is interesting. So you have the Doctor and Sarah arriving on Peladon to have the Doctor visit his old friend, well, King Peladon, who is not here in the story. Because the Doctor arrived 50 years after he last saw him, from their point of view. Which is interesting. Now, it could be maybe they want to do this just to have time progress in the story. It is possible. That and possibly because maybe, this is just maybe, I think because the actor who played King Peladon was probably not available. Who played King Peladon, you might ask? Why, it's David Troughton. You might be thinking, Troughton. Is it really a Patrick Troughton? It's his son. From what I can tell, it is his elder son. Yep, elder son. And apparently he also has several sons. There's also Sam Troughton, Jim Troughton, William Troughton, and Haley Millie. Yeah, apparently David Troughton apparently had several kids. He had like 4 boys. Yep. And this is something quite interesting, though, about him. Now, he only appeared just this story. This is the only Doctor Who story he appeared in. Now, as for why in the world he never returned to main Doctor Who, don't know. It's kind of weird, to say the least. Now, there's another monster I'll get to, because this creature pops up half of this story. Now, this also came during a time when Sarah Jane was the companion to the Doctor. When they last appeared on Peladon, Joe Grant was. And of course, Doctor changed. I think the Doctor, if I remember correctly, from that story, his outfit, he wore a red suit. This one wore a green suit for some reason. Not sure why, but so he arrives, and by the way, the Paladin is part of the Galactic Federation at this point in time. So basically, they set up like a particular, they have like their own communications equipment room. Which, if I remember correctly, I think this may have been the Doctor's room when he briefly stayed in Peladon during the original story. Which, by the way, this story comes out 2 years after The Curse of Peladon, which that is interesting to say the least. Now, I appreciate the fact that there's a lot of continuity here with the original one. Now, unlike what they did with Destiny Dalek, where I felt like basically that it didn't feel like the same exact place, that Skaro looked completely different than it did previously. This one feels like, yes, it's the same place. It's definitely aged up. Apparently the tunnel's a little more explored. Now, apparently in the original story, King Peladon had no idea the fact this palace had tunnels underneath it. Oh yeah, by the way, he had a Chancellor and High Priest. This one we have 2 who pretty much serve the same exact role for some reason. I don't know the reason for this. Oh, and by the way, is like in the original story, is the one associated with the religion of Agador. Does he get killed off in the story just like in the original one? Yep, he does. Which is strange though. It seems like they have a bit of a smaller cast than... It's like there's not many characters associated with the Queen herself. Of course, she's the daughter of King Peladon, which is interesting. Now, of course, Alpha Centauri is here, making his final appearance in Classic Who before he pops up again 50 about 53 years later in the Empress of Mars, which, well, I'll get to the reason for that. And of course, here's a fun fact about that one. That one, voiced by the same person who did it in this story. Yep, despite the fact the woman now is almost 100 years old and still managed to take time to basically reprise her character, which is great. I appreciate the fact that the person who wrote the episode actually did that. And yes, I can confirm it. I've seen Empress of Mars. It's an excellent story, featuring an alien species who makes their final appearance in the story in the classic, which I'll get to. So, this whole thing of like, there's a mine going on here, not like, oh, there's like the sacred mountain, which is quite strange. Now, the thing about Peladon that I did not like about the original story, and this is the key to this too, like, here's the strange thing about the story. It seems like it's more of a battle show. What do I mean by that? Basically confined inside, does not go outside at all. There's a little bit outside in the original story. This one, not the case. No. This was entirely inside. My guess is probably due to budget reasons. And I appreciate the fact that stuff like the Queen's throne, which was basically her father's throne in the original story. For my case, I think that's the only change they made here is that the throne looks a little different. But otherwise, it looks exactly the same. The hallways still look the same as in the original story. They must have basically brought these sets back from the original one. Also, there's another change here. Agador's symbol is on a lot of the doors. Yes, I thought that was kind of weird. Because in the original story, those were not there. Yet they're there on the door for some reason. They're painted on the control room doors. Several doors for some reason. The ones are basically associated with Peladon doors. Of course, also an armory there, which of course the Federation might put it there, obviously. And of course, also this engineer named, what's his name? Well, there's a mine named Gebek, who, by the way, it seems like, this seems quite strange, though. It seems like his hairstyle is something Peter Jackson took inspiration for a Wolfman and the Hobbit. What do I mean by that? It's this weird hairstyle where, like, the hair covers, like, the front of the side of the head, including cover of the ears, except this one had white streaks in the hair. Which I'm like, when I saw that, and I've seen The Hobbit, and I'm thinking, did Peter Jackson rip up Doctor Who with this hairstyle? Because it seems like he did. Now, these people apparently are basically like the non-nobles of Peladon. And apparently the Chancellor / High Priest, because apparently they're the same role for some reason, despite the fact that there were two set people. Here they combine them into one for some reason. Also, this I thought was quite weird. The Chancellor's beard is weirdly colored, where it's a big mixture of blonde and red. I don't know why. I appreciate, though, the fact they kept the same attire as the Chancellor from the original story, which, good on the part of, basically for that part. So, the miners are upset about the working conditions. In fact, there's actually the whole mystery of that there's Agador, of course, the suspect of trickery. Agador is, like, killing people. And the tricky part, that part to be true. And Sarah Jane at one point gets separated, gets near the refinery, and points almost his one room, which his room actually is spoilable later, which I do appreciate that. And it seems as though stuff was set up basically to be spoilable later in the story. Yes. Yeah. So then, of course, at one point, when the miners basically rebel, they get their hands on this lance spear. And, of course, they have one of the parts in with an explosion that apparently kills Doc. Nope, he's perfectly fine. They'll apparently kill the champion here this time, which, that is interesting. That's a new development. Yes, the champion got killed off. Yes, because if you're curious, though, did the champion get killed off in the original story? No, he never did. I'm not sure exactly why they killed off the champion. It's almost like they gave this guy not much of a character at all. For one thing I can tell from him, he seems like he's taller than the original champion, the one champion for the king. He's got a different hair, so the last guy was a blonde, muscular guy who couldn't speak for some reason. Though apparently the only thing he has in common with the King's Champion, he doesn't speak, and he's very muscular. Now, why the King's Champion doesn't speak? Don't know. He may have lost his tongue. They never explain that at all. Like, oh, send the Queen's Champion. Okay. And then he gets killed off in the story by the fake Spirit of Agador. Yes, and I'm like, what was the point of this character? I have no idea. Yeah, that's the thing with the champion. It's just it's almost like he's less of a character. Oh, this is interesting though. The writer of this one, Brian Hales, this is his last story he worked on. And you might be thinking, like, what other stories he worked on besides this one? Well, he also worked on apparently novel. He apparently worked on. He apparently the first story he worked on was the Celestial Toy Maker. He worked on that one. He basically wrote both stories featuring um, the Ice Warriors. Mm-hmm. And he apparently also worked on Smugglers and Seeds of Death. So basically, the guy practically created the Ice Warriors. So this was his last story for some reason. And here's also interesting though. He actually passed away 4 years after doing this story, which is interesting to say the least. The fact he did that. Yeah, I'm not really sure why, but he did. Yep, he did. And one thing I don't tell the guy who plays the Ice Lord, I mean, he sounds like the guy from, well, definitely from Seeds of Death. It seems like it's the same actor, but he's playing different characters. Probably be consistent, per se. The Ice Lord himself first showed up in Seeds of Death. The Ice Warriors, the one didn't have that. They had the regular Ice Warriors in here, except they don't do much of anything. They also have a new weapon, which apparently causes people to compress and somehow die. Yeah, and then we have, of course, the story. There's a lot of depth in this story, which is strange because the original story, there was some depth per se, but not a lot. There was like very few depths in the original story. This one, they practically kill off half the freaking cast over the course of the story. Yes, and then we have mentioned about like Galaxy 5. You're thinking Galaxy, is it really Galaxy 4? Completely different. Apparently, Galaxy 5 is sort of this antagonistic group that's attacking the Galactic Federation at war with them, and they want this particular stuff. And so apparently, this is all exaggerated by, well, somebody else I'll get to. So, by the way, the Ice Warrior should happen in the story. Yes, because apparently they were sort of called by Alpha Centauri, and it turns out they were here all along. They were basically fighting the miners just so they can basically just take the planet, get all the resources. And by the way, by the end of the story, the bad guy's defeated. Yep, he is in fact defeated. Agador returns again, except he plays a very small role in the story. Yes, they brought back Agador, the creature from the last story, and he appears for like 2 scenes, and that was it. He pops up in the pit where doctors basically. Apparently, it's implied to be the same Agador from the previous story, though I don't know if it's really true or not. And he shows up again at the end of the story, and he gets killed off. It's not stated if in fact about what happens to the rest of them. It's just that we brought back Agador for this story. He gets killed off by the engineer who turns out to be a traitor because he wants to become rich. Yep. It didn't feel as though this one had a lot of question marks. This one, not necessarily. There were some minor ones at best. I would probably say the only one I thought was really questionable is there's a few minor ones that I basically got asked. Number 1, what the heck did King Peladon die of? Was he assassinated? Don't know. Number 2, why the heck is the High Chancellor and the High Priest? Why is those 2 posts occupied with the same person? That's a good question. Number 3. Why is the Queen's Champion practically a non-character? Appears for like 2 scenes and that's it. He does practically nothing. Unlike the King's Champion from the previous story, he actually did stuff in the story. Though he was actually also kind of working for the Chancellor. And I do appreciate... Now, here's the thing about this one. The Doctor himself has also been accused of various... Now, the whole thing of Doctor being accused of stuff, that is very standard for Doctor Who at this time. Because it even happened in this story. But it wasn't like the whole thing of like not listening to him. It wasn't as over the top like it was in Mama Little Snowman. Which I appreciate the fact that it was like that. Mm-hmm. Eventually, of course, they do agree allow him to investigate. And I do appreciate the fact this actually was a really good story. Sadly, this will be the second last we'll talk about for John Pertwee's final season. Now, next one I was planning on doing Invasion Time next, but I'm going to hold off until I went to after I do Deadly Assassin. So next time will be the third part, The Key of Time. Oh, what rating did I get this one? I get this one a 9.5. Actually, I'm going to give it a 10. Just a damn good story. Yep. Oh, yeah. So, by the way, this is actually the 73rd story of Doctor Who. Yep. So, yeah, that's a particular review. Stay tuned for tomorrow for Comic Corners and another Doctor Who review. Okay, next video. Bye.